You're getting on your knees in the next 10 seconds, or I'm going to put you there myself." The voice belonged to a uniform on a Florida county road at 6:07 p.m., thumb already resting on the catch of a holster. He had pulled over 2 black men who fit no description he had received, and he had already decided his dash camera would later be reported as malfunctioning. What he did not know was that 20 yards away, behind a gas pump, a second-year law student was holding her phone level with the bumper of his cruiser, and the recording was uploading to a cloud the moment it began. The officer's nameplate read, "Morton." The patch on his shoulder read, "Manatee Springs Police." The car in front of him was a silver Volvo XC60 with Florida plates and a clean inspection sticker. He had pulled it over because the older man behind the wheel had glanced at his cruiser when he passed it on US 41. Glanced too long, in Morton's opinion. The older man's hands sat at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, exactly the way the state driver's manual said to rest them during a stop. The younger man in the passenger seat was looking through the windshield at a stack of receipts in the cup holder. Neither of them had said a word since Morton walked up. That was the first thing that bothered him. "I asked you a question." Morton's knuckles drummed the doorframe. The Volvo hummed in idle. "Let me hear you, gentlemen. Let me hear something." The older man finally answered. "We're complying, officer. We'd just like to know why we were stopped." Morton liked the answer the way a fisherman likes the moment a hook sets. "Compliance," he said, smiling without any warmth. "That's a real big word. You always carry words like that with you?" The younger man did not move. His eyes never left the receipts in the cup holder. There was a discipline to that stillness, the kind of stillness practiced for years. "Out of the car," Morton said. "Both of you. Now." The older man's hand drifted toward the gear shift, lowering the Volvo into park. "Slow," Morton snapped. "Real slow." "My hand is going to the door handle, officer. I am stepping out as instructed." "You'll step out when I tell you to step out. You just told us to step out." The smile dropped off Morton's face. His shoulder tightened where the body cam should have been. He had made certain on his way over that it wasn't. "Get out of the car." The Volvo doors opened in unison. The older man was tall, maybe 6'1", mid-40s, salt at the temples, a navy blazer over a gray t-shirt. The younger man was broader, late 30s, a windbreaker zipped to the collar despite the heat. Neither carried a wallet. Neither reached for one. That was the second thing that bothered Morton. Across the road, behind a yellow Phillips 66 pump, the law student watching them was named Serena Mayfield. She was 24 years old. She was holding her phone in the universal grip of every law student who has spent 2 years in evidence class. Frame steady, lens clean, audio uncovered, screen tilted just enough that the timestamp in the corner stayed in shot. She had not planned to film anything that night. She had stopped because the gas light in her Toyota Corolla had come on 3 miles earlier, and the next station was 30. She had hit record because she had heard the voice from the uniform first. If you can already feel where this is going, hit the subscribe button right now. There are details coming up that you are going to want to see twice. Serena had grown up 2 counties west of Manatee Springs. She had been raised by an aunt who had worked 30 years as a clerk at the courthouse in Sarasota, and who had, on Serena's 12th birthday, sat her down and explained, in language a 12-year-old could not yet fully understand, why a black girl with good grades should learn the difference between a lawful order and a lawful-sounding order before she ever needed to know it. Serena had kept that lesson in a closed drawer of her head for 12 years. The drawer had opened the moment she heard the word knees. She lowered the phone half an inch, raised it again, and made certain the Volvo's rear plate was in the corner of the frame. She made certain the cruiser's number was visible above the bumper. Unit 14. She made certain the Phillips 66 sign over her shoulder, with its slow blink and its store hours in vinyl letters, was inside the shot. 3 landmarks. 3 pieces of foundation. She had paid attention in evidence class. The pump beside her clicked off at $15 even. She didn't move. "I asked for license and registration." Morton's voice carried easily across the 4-lane road. The Volvo's older driver had begun reaching toward his blazer and had stopped halfway, hand suspended at chest height. "My identification is in the inside pocket of my jacket, officer. I'm asking permission before I retrieve it." "You're asking permission," Morton said, savoring the phrase. "That's a courtesy." "It is." "You always this courteous to law enforcement?" "When I'm asked to be." Morton turned in a slow half-circle, taking in the Volvo, the highway, the empty turn lane, the strip of palmettos beyond the shoulder. He turned back. He had not given permission. "Why don't you tell me what you're doing in Manatee Springs?" "Driving through?" "Driving through to where?" "Tampa." "From?" "Naples." "What for?" The older man's mouth moved, almost a half-smile. Not at Morton, at the question. "A meeting." "Meeting with who?" "That's not something I'm prepared to discuss on a traffic stop, officer." Morton stepped closer. His left boot crunched on a chip of asphalt that had broken loose from the shoulder. The younger man, the one in the windbreaker, shifted his weight an inch and let it back. "You don't get to decide what we discuss," Morton said. "I do. You understand that?" "Use?" "I understand the question. I'm declining to answer." "Declining?" "Yes." "That's another big word." "It's the right one, officer." Morton's right hand twitched at his side. He took it off the holster and put it on his belt. He tilted his head toward the younger man, the broader one in the windbreaker. "You. What's your name?" "Trent Bellamy." "Identification?" "In my back pocket. I'd like to retrieve it." Slow. Trent moved his hand back, 2 fingers, paper wallet, no abrupt motion, no posture shift. He held the wallet out by its edges so the contents stayed inside. Morton took it without thanking him and flipped it open without looking inside. "Both of you. Hands on the hood." The older man, Devon Whitaker, did not move. "On what basis are we being detained, officer?" "On the basis that I told you to put your hands on the hood." "That isn't a legal basis. It's an instruction." A muscle in Morton's jaw lifted. "You want to lawyer me at the side of the road, sir?" "I want to comply with a lawful order. I'm asking what the order is based on." "It's based on the fact that you're suspicious." "What is suspicious about us?" Morton's hand came back to the holster. "You're asking too many questions." There was a silence then that was not silence. The Phillips 66 pump beside Serena clicked again. An automatic settle. A dog barked once, 2 blocks off, and quit. The cars on US 41 hissed past at 50 miles an hour and gave the cruiser a wide arc, the way drivers always did when blue lights were on. Serena's phone was warm in her hand. The cloud bar in the corner of her screen, the one she had configured the week she signed her clinic intake forms, ticked from blue to green and back to blue. Across the highway, in the front window of a single-story building with a hand-painted sign that read, "Lattimore's Sunrise Bakery," a woman in a flour-dusted apron stood very still behind the glass. Her name was Pearl Lattimore. She was 68 years old. She had owned the bakery for 41. Most of the regulars in Manatee Springs called her Mama Pearl because her mother had been called that, and her grandmother before that, and the name had simply walked down the family the way a key walks down a chain. She had seen Officer Gage Morton's cruiser pull off US 41 and into the median 10 minutes earlier. She had watched him sit behind the highway sign for one of those 10 minutes, watched him wait for a car he liked, watched him pull out behind the silver Volvo without a working signal. She had done what she always did when she saw his cruiser ease out of that median. She had picked up the cordless phone behind her counter. She had not dialed it. She had put it back down on its cradle the way she had put it down 100 times in 22 years. Tonight she didn't move from the window. "Hands on the hood," Morton said again. "I'm not going to ask you a 4th time." Devon turned slowly and laid his palms on the Volvo's hood. The metal was hot enough that he had to lift them an inch and let them down again. "Spread," Morton said. Devon spread. "You too." Trent placed his hands on the hood and let his weight forward. His expression had not changed since he had stepped out of the car. The receipts in the cup holder had been the last thing he had looked at before he stopped looking at anything. Morton stepped behind Devon. His knee came up against the back of Devon's left thigh and pressed hard, the way an officer presses to make a person widen their stance further than they already have. It was unnecessary. Devon's stance was already wide. The press was for show. It was the first thing on Serena's recording that would later be called violence. "You got a knife on you?" "No." "You got a gun on you?" "No." "What's in your pockets?" "Wallet, phone, pen, room key for a hotel in Sarasota." "Why a Sarasota hotel if you're driving from Naples to Tampa?" "I have business in both." "Business?" "Yes." Morton's hand moved into Devon's blazer. He did not ask. He did not announce. He patted the lining and felt the wallet there and pulled it out. He flipped it open one-handed. Driver's license. 2 credit cards. A laminated card with a phone number on it. No badge. No identification beyond the license. Morton's eyes lingered on the laminated card for a beat. He turned it over. The back was blank. "What's this?" "A phone number." "For who?" "Someone I call when I need to." Morton put the wallet on the hood beside Devon's right hand and tapped it twice with 2 fingers. "Stay there." He walked around the front of the Volvo to Trent. Trent had not turned his head. The windbreaker was zipped tight against his collarbone in 84-degree heat. Morton noticed the zipper. He noticed the way the windbreaker sat too flat across the chest. He patted Trent down and stopped at the right hip. He patted again, held his hand there. "What's this?" "Personal carry." "Concealed?" "Permitted. The card is in my wallet." Morton drew Trent's wallet out of the back pocket of his pants. He flipped it open. Florida driver's license. Concealed weapon license. A laminated card that looked very much like the one in Devon's wallet. Morton frowned. "Who do you call when you need to?" "That number." "It's the same number." "It is." Morton looked between the 2 cards. The frown did not loosen. He folded the wallet shut and dropped it on the hood of the Volvo. The wallet skidded an inch and stopped. "Both of you, hands behind your backs." "On what basis?" Devon asked again. "Officer safety." "What is the threat?" Morton's right palm landed flat against Devon's shoulder blade and shoved him forward. Devon's chest hit the hood. The metal was hot. He kept his face turned to the side. He did not make a sound. The shove was the second thing on the recording that would later be called violence. "Hands behind your back," Morton said, soft now, the way a man speaks when he wants the camera, if it had been on, to think he was being calm. "I'm complying," Devon said. "Then comply faster." Morton snapped a cuff onto Devon's right wrist and pulled the arm back hard enough that Devon's shoulder rolled in its socket. The cuff clicked 1 notch tighter than it needed to. He brought the left wrist around and clicked that one tight too. He moved to Trent. Trent was already turning to put his hands behind him when Morton hit him. It was not a punch. It was a backhanded slap to the side of the face, open, with the fingers, the kind a man delivers to humiliate, not to bruise. The crack of it carried across the highway. Serena's lens caught it cleanly, the angle of Trent's head, the snap of his cheekbone away from Morton's knuckles, the small step Trent took to keep his footing without lifting his hands. Trent did not lift his hands. He had been trained, somewhere by somebody, to take a strike and not lift his hands. Morton noticed. Morton stored it. He cuffed Trent next. "You feel that?" Morton said into Trent's ear, still close, still low. "That's how it goes when you don't keep your eyes where I can see them." "My eyes were on the windshield, officer." "Your eyes were nowhere I told you to keep them." "Where would you like them, sir?" "On the asphalt." "Yes, officer." Trent looked down at the asphalt. Morton walked back to his cruiser and keyed the radio on his shoulder. "Unit 14, dispatch. I have 2 males detained on shoulder of US 41 north of Manatee Springs at mile marker 37. Going to need a second unit for vehicle search." The radio popped. "Unit 14, dispatch, copy. Sending Sergeant Pike. ETA 7 minutes. Copy." He clicked off and turned back. Devon and Trent were standing where he had left them, hands cuffed behind their backs, foreheads inches off the hot hood of the Volvo. Morton walked between them and let his shoulder graze Devon's bicep on the way past. He did it on purpose. He did it because no camera was on. He did it because he had practiced not minding cameras for 18 years, and he had gotten good at the practice. He didn't see Serena Mayfield's phone behind the gas pump. He didn't see Mama Pearl Lattimore's eyes in the bakery window. He didn't see what either of them had already seen. Across the highway, Pearl picked up the cordless phone again. She held it. She did not dial. Her thumb hovered over the buttons the way it had hovered for 22 years. She set the phone down on the counter, but this time, for the first time in her life, she did not put it back on the cradle. She left it sitting flat on the counter, awake, ready. She had watched a young waitress named LaToya Briggs come out of the back of Morton's cruiser with a split lip in 1999 and refuse to file a report. She had watched a young man named Curtis Doyle limp into her bakery in 2004 with a wallet full of cash that wasn't there an hour later when the deputies asked. She had watched a teenager named Marcus, no last name she ever learned, sit on her stoop on a Tuesday afternoon in 2011 with one shoe on and one shoe somewhere else, crying so hard he could not breathe, and refused to tell her what had happened to the second shoe. She had bought every one of them a hot meal. She had called nobody. Tonight she stood at her window with a cordless phone face up on the counter behind her and watched Officer Gage Morton lean into two strangers cuffed against a Volvo, and she felt something in her chest move that had been still for 41 years. Serena, across the highway, lowered her phone for 1 second, 2, 3. She turned the camera around in selfie mode. She kept her face below the lower edge of the frame. She tapped record on a second app, the one her clinic supervisor had told every intern to install, the one that backed up to a separate cloud. She tapped record. She turned the camera back around. 2 cameras now. 2 clouds. One of them had her name on it. One of them did not. The cruiser of Sergeant Dorian Pike pulled in behind Morton's at 6:21 p.m. Pike was 47, thin, mustache trimmed to a millimeter under regulation, the kind of officer who carried his own pen and his own forms in a leather portfolio because he did not trust the supply closet at the precinct. He had served with Morton for 14 years. He had written reports for Morton's stops for 9 of them. He had a reputation for clean paperwork. The reputation was deserved. The cleanliness was the problem. Pike got out, settled his belt, and walked up the shoulder without hurrying. "What do we have?" 2 suspicious males in a Volvo. Profile fits a recent bolo out of Sarasota. Stop turned hands on for officer safety. Bolo number? I didn't catch the number. Came over the radio earlier. Earlier when? Morton's eyes slid sideways. Earlier this shift. Pike nodded slowly. He understood Morton the way an accountant understands a client whose receipts have always been a little off. He looked at Devon, then at Trent, then at the Volvo's interior through the open driver's window. He looked at the cup holder. The receipts were stacked neatly. There was no fast food trash. The center console was clean. The seats were vacuumed. The car was the kind of car that had been wiped down within the last 48 hours, and Pike could see that as well as Morton could. Identification? Got their wallets, driver's license on the older one, concealed carry permit on the younger. Carry permit is in order. Looks like. You verify it? Going to. You should go too. Pike's voice was flat. Morton walked back to his cruiser and sat down in the driver's seat with the door open. He typed at the laptop mounted to his dash. Pike watched him for a beat and then turned back to the Volvo. "Sir," Pike said, addressing Devon, "I'm going to ask you to step away from the vehicle, slowly. My hands are cuffed. I'll guide you." Devon stepped back at Pike's elbow. He moved the way a man with cuffs on moves, off balance, but unhurried. Pike walked him 3 feet from the hood and stopped. "What's your name, sir?" "Devon Whitaker." "Address?" 204 East Atlantic Boulevard, Pompano Beach. "Date of birth?" Devon gave it. "Reason for travel today?" "Business." "What kind?" That's not something I'm prepared to discuss roadside. Pike's mustache lifted a quarter inch. That's your right, sir. He turned to Trent. Sir, same questions. Briefly, please. Trent gave his name, his address, a Tampa post office box, his date of birth, and the phrase private contractor for his profession. Pike wrote each answer in his portfolio in his cramped, unfailingly legible cursive. He did not press for elaboration. He closed the portfolio. Officer Morton, he said, not loudly. Step over here. Morton stepped over. What did you stop them for? Tag was sitting funny on the plate. Could be displayed improperly. Could be. Plus, there was a call earlier. You mentioned. What was the call? Suspicious vehicle in the lot of the Sun Coast Credit Union earlier today. Silver SUV, 2 occupants. That's a credit union 40 miles from here. Mobile suspect. Pike looked at Morton for the length of time it would have taken him to write a long sentence, in his portfolio. He did not write anything. Any other reason for the stop? Officer's discretion. Officer's discretion. Yes, Sergeant. Pike turned and walked to the rear of the Volvo. He looked at the license plate. The frame was straight, the bolts were tight, the plate was readable from 40 feet. He came back. Plate looks correct to me. Looked off in my mirror. Mirror or windshield? Mirror. At what distance? Couple car lengths. Couple car lengths. Yes. Pike took out his pen. He clicked it twice. He clicked it back. He did not write. This was the thing about Sergeant Dorian Pike. He had never written down a lie for Officer Gage Morton. He had only written down the lie's preferred version of the truth. He had worked out in his head a long time ago that there was a difference. He had also worked out, more recently, that the difference might not matter to the reader in a federal grand jury room. He had thought about that difference exactly once a week for the last 6 months. He was thinking about it now. All right, he said, run their names through NCIC, both of them, right now, while I stand here. I'm on it. Morton walked back to his cruiser. He sat down at the laptop and typed both names into the National Crime Information Center query line. The query bar spun. He waited. He stared at the screen as the query bar continued to spin. He hit refresh. The bar froze. He hit refresh again. The bar resumed spinning, slower. In the corner of the screen, in pale gray text, a small notice appeared. Query, delay. Record access pending administrative clearance. Morton stared at the line. He had never seen that line before. He hit refresh. The line stayed. He minimized the window and opened a different one, the secondary state database, and ran both names there. Florida David. The query bar spun. The same line appeared, in slightly different language. Administrative lock on record. Contact watch commander. He stared at it for a count of 3. Then he closed the window. He closed both windows. He got out of the cruiser. They're clean, he said to Pike. Pike looked at him. Clean how? NCIC didn't return anything. Show me. It's already cleared. Show me anyway. It cleared off the screen, Sergeant. Nothing to show. Pike's mustache did not move. His eyes did. They went, just for a second, to the Volvo, to Devon, to Trent. They came back. All right. He turned to Devon. Sir, we're going to ask you a few more questions while we conduct a search of the vehicle for officer safety. You have the right to refuse the search. Do you consent? No. You are refusing consent to search. I am. Officer Morton has indicated he has reason to believe the vehicle may contain contraband. Under Florida case law, that probable cause may be sufficient to conduct a warrantless search of the vehicle. Do you understand that? I understand the doctrine you're citing. I'd like that on the record. I am not consenting. Understood, sir. Pike turned to Morton. You said you have probable cause. Smelled marijuana on approach. You smelled marijuana on approach. Faintly. Faintly. From the driver's window. Pike's pen clicked twice. Again. He did not say what he was thinking. What he was thinking was that he had stood next to Morton at 4 traffic stops that month, and at each of those 4 traffic stops, Morton had smelled marijuana faintly from the driver's window, and at each of those 4 stops, the driver had been black, and at each of those 4 stops, exactly 0 marijuana had been recovered. He said, instead, "Conduct your search." Across the highway, Pearl Lattimore left the bakery window. She walked, slowly, behind her counter, and unlocked the small drawer beneath the cash register. Inside the drawer was a manila envelope. The envelope had been there for 9 years. She had taped it shut in 2017, on a Tuesday afternoon, after the 3rd time a young man limped out of the back of Morton's cruiser into her shop with his pockets turned out and his eyes turned down. She had taped it shut. She had labeled it with 1 word. She had not opened it since. She picked up the envelope. She held it. She put it on the counter beside the cordless phone. She walked back to the window. If you've ever sat on something for years because you didn't think anyone would believe you, this story is for you. Hit subscribe so the next one finds you too. Officer Wells Hart pulled in at 6:27 p.m. He was 31 years old, slim, on his 4th year with Manatee Springs PD, and he carried 2 body cameras, a department-issue Axon and a personal Axon that he had bought, used on a police surplus site 8 months earlier. He carried the personal one because the department-issue one had a habit, when he was on a call with Officer Morton, of failing to record. The failure rate of department-issue cameras assigned to Officer Morton's calls had been entered into a spreadsheet by an internal affairs investigator named Riley Connors 3 months earlier. Hart did not know about the spreadsheet. He suspected something like it existed. He got out of his cruiser and walked up. He nodded to Pike. He did not nod to Morton. Starting search. Trunk first. Hart attached his department-issue camera to its mount on his chest. He patted it. The light came on. He turned, walked to the rear of the Volvo, and watched Morton press the trunk release on the key fob he had taken from Devon's pocket. The trunk yawned open. Inside was a compact black overnight bag, a folded jacket, a leather portfolio, a paper grocery bag with a loaf of bread sticking out the top, and a clear plastic case with a label on the side that read, "First Aid." There was nothing else. The trunk floor liner was clean. The spare tire well was closed. The trunk smelled, faintly, of laundry soap. Hart panned across all of it slowly. His chest camera light blinked steady green. "Okay," Morton said. "Move." Hart stepped to the side. Morton leaned in over the trunk. He picked up the overnight bag and unzipped it. Inside were 2 folded shirts, a toiletry bag, a pair of dress shoes wrapped in a hotel laundry sleeve, and a hardback book with a library spine. Morton flipped the book open. 2 pages of margin notes in pen. Tight, even handwriting. He flipped back to the cover. He read the title. He frowned. He set the book on the trunk floor face down. He pulled out the toiletry bag. Toothbrush, razor, deodorant. A small leather case of cufflinks. He set the toiletry bag back inside. He opened the leather portfolio. Manila folders. Tabs labeled in pencil. He did not read them. He shut it. He did not pick up the paper grocery bag. He did not open the first aid case. He did not check the spare tire well. He stood up, stretched, glanced once at Pike. Pike was 20 feet away, talking quietly to Trent, and looked toward Wells Hart's chest camera. What happened next happened in 8 seconds. Morton stepped forward, positioning his body between the trunk and Hart's camera. His left hand went to his right hip pocket. From the pocket he drew a small object, palm size, and flat. He did not look at it. He brought the hand up. He placed the object at the back of the trunk, just behind the spare tire cover, in a shadow under the rim. He pulled the spare tire cover an inch toward himself, exposing the corner of the object so a search could find it. He stepped back. The whole motion was the practiced motion of a man who had done it before. Hart's chest camera caught Morton's back. Hart's chest camera did not catch Morton's hands. But Serena Mayfield, 20 yards away, behind a Phillips 66 pump, with a phone braced against the metal frame of the gas pump for stability, with a lens at full optical zoom, with 2 clouds backing up 2 recordings, had not been standing where Morton's back was a wall. She had been standing at an angle. She had been standing at the precise angle from which Morton's right hand, going to his right hip pocket, coming up with a flat, palm-size object and laying it in the shadow under the rim of the spare tire cover, was visible from start to finish. Her phone had recorded all of it. Her phone had finished uploading the first 6 minutes of footage before Morton had even pulled out the object. The phone was still uploading. The bar in the corner of her screen ticked from blue to green and back to blue. She lowered the phone half an inch. She raised it again. She did not breathe loudly. She did not breathe at all for what felt like a full count of 10, and was probably 3. Across the highway, in the bakery window, Pearl Lattimore had also seen it. She had seen it because she had, 22 years ago, watched Officer Gage Morton pull a flat palm-size object out of his hip pocket on the front porch of a man named James Ridley, 54 years old, mechanic, 2 children, no record, and lay that object behind a flower pot, and call for backup, and arrest James Ridley, and take James Ridley to a courtroom where James Ridley pled guilty rather than face a jury he did not believe would believe him over a uniform. James Ridley had served 4 years. James Ridley had died of a heart attack in 2013, 3 days after his release. Pearl had been at the funeral. Pearl had seen the same hand do the same thing twice now. The first time she had said nothing. The second time she watched it through her own front window with the cordless phone face up on the counter behind her and the manila envelope she had taped shut 9 years ago lying flat beside it. She walked, very slowly, to the front door of her bakery. She turned the lock. She turned the open sign to closed. She walked, very slowly, back to the window. In the trunk of the Volvo, Officer Gage Morton was making a small show of looking under the spare tire cover. He moved his head left. He moved his head right. He frowned theatrically. He reached in. He lifted the cover. He lifted out the object. It was a small, clear plastic baggie, sealed with a heat seal at the top, containing a quantity of white crystalline material that, under any reasonable test, would identify as a controlled substance. He held it up between his thumb and forefinger. "Sergeant," he said. Pike turned. Hart's chest camera turned. The light on the camera blinked steady green. The light on Serena Mayfield's phone, behind the Phillips 66 pump, 20 yards away, 2 clouds running, 2 recordings, also blinked steady green. "Got something," Morton said. He held the bag higher. "Sergeant, I've got a quantity of what appears to be a controlled substance, recovered from beneath the spare tire cover, rear of the vehicle. 2 suspects detained. Vehicle search ongoing." Pike walked over slowly. His mustache did not move. He took the bag from Morton's hand by the corner. He held it up to the late afternoon light. He looked at it for what would later, on review, be measured at 4 full seconds. Hart's department issue camera caught the 4 seconds. Hart's personal camera, which he had clipped to the inside of his ballistic vest, caught the 4 seconds, and Pike's expression, which was not the expression of an officer surprised by a recovery. It was the expression of an officer who had been waiting, for some time, for an excuse. "All right," Pike said. "Bag and tag it. Both suspects under arrest." "Yes, Sergeant." "Read them their rights." "Yes, Sergeant." "And Officer Morton." "Yes, Sergeant." "You're going to want your camera back on, going forward. It's been on, Sergeant. On." "It hasn't, Officer Morton. The light hasn't been on since I got here." There was a small silence. "Must have gotten knocked off." "Must have." Pike turned away. He stepped over to Devon. He bent slightly so his face was level with Devon's. "Sir, you are now under arrest for possession of a controlled substance. You have the right to remain silent." He continued through Miranda, the cadence of a man who had said it 10,000 times. Devon did not interrupt. Devon did not nod. Devon held still in his cuffs. The metal of the Volvo's hood was no longer hot. The sun had begun, in the way it does on July evenings in Florida, to lean. Pike finished. He moved to Trent. He repeated it. Trent did not interrupt either. Trent did not nod either. Trent's eyes had gone, for the first time since the stop began, to a specific place, to the gas station across the road, to the Phillips 66 sign with its slow blink, to a young woman in jeans and a denim jacket holding a phone braced against the metal frame of a gas pump. He looked at her for 1 second. He looked away. He looked back. He looked away. Serena did not lower the phone. She did not raise it either. She did not move. A car pulled past on US 41, and the wash of its headlights swept across the Volvo and the cruiser and Trent's face. He blinked. His mouth tightened. He looked toward the highway, north, the way one looks when one is keeping a bearing in mind. He looked back down at the asphalt. He did not look at Serena again, but he had seen her. And Serena, who had been a paralegal at a legal aid office in Tampa for 2 summers before she started law school, who had seen the look on the face of every client who had ever arrived at the office with new bruises and an old story, who had been raised by an aunt who had taught her how to pick up a fact and carry it without dropping it, knew exactly what the look from Trent Bellamy meant. Stay. Keep filming. You're our witness. She did not nod. She did not blink in any kind of code. She simply did not move her phone. The phone kept recording. Trent did not look at her again. Morton walked Devon to the rear door of his cruiser. He opened the door. He put his hand on the back of Devon's head, the way officers are trained to do to keep a cuffed suspect from hitting his head on the doorframe, and he pushed, harder than the maneuver requires. Devon's forehead struck the upper edge of the doorframe. The strike was small but audible. The skin above his right eyebrow split. A line of blood opened along the brow line and crept down toward his eye. Devon did not flinch. He did not raise his head. He sat sideways in the back of the cruiser, blood beginning to trickle along the curve of his cheek, and he did not say a word. That was the third thing on Serena's recording that would later be called violence. Morton shut the door. He walked around to the driver's side and stood for a second with his hands on his hips. He breathed out, twice, through his nose. Then he turned to Trent. "You're with me too." "Yes, officer." "Walk." Trent walked. Morton kept his palm on the back of Trent's neck the entire way, an unbroken 10-foot pressure, fingers tightening twice. He guided Trent toward Pike's cruiser instead of his own. Pike opened the back door. Morton put his hand on the back of Trent's head and pushed. This time, he did not push as hard. The cameras were back on. He had remembered that, suddenly, and adjusted. Trent ducked, cleanly, and slid into the back seat. The door closed behind him. Pike's mustache lifted a 1/4 inch again. The radio on Morton's shoulder popped. "Unit 14, dispatch." "Go ahead, dispatch." "Watch commander wants a status on your stop at mile marker 37. 2 suspects under arrest. Possession of controlled substance recovered from vehicle. Transporting to station." "Copy. Watch commander advises that you are to remain on scene. Do not transport. Repeat, do not transport. Captain Duvall is en route to your location. ETA 18 minutes. There was a pause on Morton's end of the radio that was longer than it should have been. "Dispatch, repeat the last part." "Captain Duvall is en route. ETA 18 minutes. "Copy. Confirm receipt." "Receipt confirmed. We are holding scene." The radio popped again and went quiet. Morton stood very still for a count of 2. Then he turned and looked at Pike. Pike was already looking at him. Pike's hand was on the door of his own cruiser. He had not closed the door yet. Trent was visible through the back window, sitting upright, looking out at the highway, expression unchanged. "Captain's coming?" Morton said softly. "That's what dispatch said. He doesn't roll on stops." "I know he doesn't." "Why is he rolling on this one?" Pike did not answer. The last time Captain Roland Duvall had personally rolled on a traffic stop in Manatee Springs had been on a Tuesday morning 7 years earlier, and the stop had ended with the resignation of 2 officers, the demotion of a sergeant, and the involuntary retirement of a deputy chief. The story had been told around the precinct in low voices ever since. The version of the story that had circulated was a sanitized one. The version Pike had read in the closed file was not sanitized. He thought about the closed file now, standing on the shoulder of US 41, listening to the dispatch radio click off, holding the corner of a baggie of white crystalline material between his thumb and forefinger. Pike thought about a sentence Captain Duvall had said to him exactly once on Pike's second day under Duvall's command, 14 years earlier. "Sergeant," the captain had said, looking at Pike across a desk in an office that smelled of coffee and printer toner, "the only thing I require of any man under my supervision is that when I look at his nameplate, I am not embarrassed by what's behind it. If I am ever embarrassed, the nameplate will not survive the day." Pike looked down at the baggie in his hand. He looked up at Morton's nameplate. He did not say anything. Across the highway, Pearl Lattimore was no longer at the window. Pearl Lattimore was walking, with the manila envelope under her arm and the cordless phone in her right hand, out the front door of her bakery. She crossed the small parking lot. She crossed the access road. She stopped at the edge of US 41 and waited for the cars to pass. A truck went by, then a sedan, then a minivan with a child's face pressed against the back window. She crossed. She walked, slowly but without stopping, along the gravel shoulder toward the gas pumps. She did not look at the cruisers. She did not look at the Volvo. She walked directly to the Phillips 66 pump where Serena Mayfield was standing, and she stopped 4 feet behind her, and she said, in a voice low enough that nobody on the other side of the highway could possibly have heard, "Honey, don't stop." Serena did not turn her head. "I'm not." "I have something you need to see." "Stay there. They can't see you behind the pump." "All right." Pearl stayed behind the pump. She was breathing fast. Her hand on the manila envelope was unsteady. She did not lower the envelope. She did not raise it. She held it. "My name is Pearl Lattimore," she said. "I own that bakery." "I know who you are. I came in last summer." "You did?" "Apple turnover. I was on a road trip with my aunt." "I remember the road trip. I remember your aunt. I'm a law student, second year, Tampa." "What's your name?" "Serena Mayfield." "Serena, listen to me, the man over there, the officer, the one with the bag in his hand. I have watched him do this for 22 years. I have an envelope here with names in it. I have names. I have dates. I never opened my mouth because I never thought it would do anything. I'm opening it now." "Hold on," Serena said quietly. "Don't say a word more. Not until I get you on a separate device. I have one in my car. 2-minute walk. Can you wait?" "I can wait. Stay behind the pump." "I'll stay behind the pump." Serena lowered her phone for the first time in 22 minutes. She did not stop the recording. She tucked the phone into her jacket pocket with the lens up so it could continue to capture audio. She walked casually, the way a person walks when they are pretending they are about to top off their tank, to the driver's side of her Toyota Corolla. She opened the passenger door. She reached into the glove compartment. She pulled out a small black device the size of a hotel room key. It was a digital voice recorder, the kind her clinic supervisor handed out at the start of every semester to every intern. She pressed the round button on its face. A red light came on. She slid the device into the breast pocket of her denim jacket, lens up. She walked back to the pump. She did not hurry. She stood beside Pearl. She did not look at her. "Tell me your name again, ma'am." "Pearl Lattimore." "And your address?" Pearl gave it. "And the date today?" Pearl gave it. "And you understand this conversation is being recorded?" "I understand." "All right, Mrs. Lattimore. I'm listening." Pearl began to talk. What she said, on a small black digital recorder pressed against the inside of the breast pocket of a denim jacket, on the shoulder of a 4-lane highway in Manatee Springs, Florida, on a Tuesday evening in July, with the sun beginning to lean, with the cicadas thickening in the palmettos, with a captain 16 minutes away, was the sealed history of Officer Gage Morton's career. She said the name James Ridley, 2003. Front porch. A flat object placed behind a flower pot. 4 years. She said the name LaToya Briggs, 1999. Split lip. Refused report. She said the name Curtis Doyle, 2004. Wallet. Cash gone. She said the name Marcus, no last name. 2011. 1 shoe. She said 5 more names from 5 more years with 5 more stories. She said finally that she had taped an envelope shut 9 years ago because she had thought a 10th name would be enough to fill her with shame for the rest of her life, and that she had been right, and that the shame had been waiting for her every morning at 4 a.m. when she came in to start the bread. She said she was sorry. She said it 3 times. She said she should have spoken sooner. Serena let her cry, quietly, behind the pump, for 1 full minute. She did not turn off the recorder. The recorder kept recording. Hit the like button right now before you forget. This story was buried for 22 years. The only reason you're hearing it is that 2 cameras were rolling at the same time. Help us keep them rolling. Across the highway, on the shoulder of US 41, Officer Gage Morton was no longer talking. He was standing beside his cruiser with one hand on the open driver's door and the other on his belt, and he was looking down the highway, north, the direction Captain Roland Duvall would come from, and he was not blinking as often as he should have been. Sergeant Pike was leaning against the rear quarter panel of his own cruiser. The baggie was in a small clear evidence pouch in his shirt pocket. He had sealed it, signed the seal, written the case number, written the recovery officer, written the recovery time. He had filled in every line on the chain of custody form he carried in his portfolio. He had done it perfectly. He had also, when nobody was looking, written one small word in the corner of the form, in pencil, in his own private shorthand. The word was, simply, ask. He did not know yet what he was going to ask. Officer Wells Hart had walked back to his cruiser and was sitting in the driver's seat with the door open. Both his cameras were still on. The department issue had cycled twice during the call, an automatic pause and resume that produced 2 small unexplained gaps in the footage. The personal camera, clipped to the inside of his vest, had not paused once. He had not yet decided what he was going to do with the personal camera's footage. He had been deciding, in small ways, for 8 months. The deciding had always been theoretical. It had stopped being theoretical 4 minutes ago, when he had heard the dispatcher say the name Duvall. Deputy Sloan Avery, of the Manatee County Sheriff's Office, pulled in at 6:41 p.m. He had not been called. He had been driving back from a service call at a hardware store in Parrish, and had heard the radio chatter and had turned south on US 41 because he did not like the sound of what he had heard. He was 53 years old, 27 of those years in uniform. He had not been a friend to the Manatee Springs PD. He had not been an enemy. He had been, for 27 years, a man who believed, with the steady belief of a man who had stopped expecting anything else, that most of the trouble in the county was made by people in uniform and most of the rest of it was tolerated by people in uniform. He distrusted outsiders. He distrusted insiders. He distrusted most of all traffic stops that took longer than 30 minutes. This stop was 34 minutes old. Avery pulled in behind Pike's cruiser. He got out. He put on his hat. He walked up the shoulder. "Sergeant?" "Deputy?" "What do we have?" "Possession of a controlled substance recovered from the trunk. 2 suspects in custody. Captain Duvall is en route." Avery's eyebrows did not move. They had been, for 27 years, a marvel of stillness. "Duvall is en route?" "Affirmative." "On what?" "On this." Avery looked at the Volvo. He looked at Devon in the back of Morton's cruiser, blood drying along his right cheek. He looked at Trent in the back of Pike's cruiser, looking through the windshield at the gas station across the road. He looked, finally, at Officer Gage Morton, standing by his open driver's door, not blinking. "Gage," Avery said. "Deputy. What did you stop them for?" "Improper display of tag." "I'm looking at the tag." "Looked off in my mirror." "It's straight." "Mirror angle." Avery did not answer. He walked, in his slow, methodical way, to the rear of the Volvo. He looked at the plate. He looked at the bumper. He looked at the trunk, which was still open. He looked into the trunk. He stood there for what felt like a long time. He came back. "Anything in the trunk besides the recovery?" "Overnight bag, toiletries, books, first aid case." "You opened the first aid case?" "No reason to." "Open it." Morton looked at Pike. Pike's mustache did not lift. Pike said, "Open it, officer." Morton walked back to the trunk. He bent over. He flipped open the first aid case. Avery walked up beside him. The first aid case did not contain first aid supplies. It contained a folded sheet of laminated cardstock. The cardstock was the size of a passport. On the front of the card was a small photograph of a man. On the photograph was a name. Above the name was a printed line of agency text. Morton's hand stopped moving. His thumb stayed on the laminated card. He stared at it. Pike walked over slowly. He looked into the case. He looked at the laminated card. He looked, very slowly, at Morton. His mustache did not move. His eyes did. Morton did not pick up the laminated card. He did not put the case back. He did not look up. His cruiser radio popped. "Unit 14, dispatch. Captain Duvall is now 7 minutes out." "Copy," Morton said, automatic, without turning his head. "Captain advises he wants a clean scene on his arrival. Unit 14, do you copy?" "Copy." The radio went quiet. A breeze moved up the shoulder of US 41 and lifted a stray paper napkin from the gravel and pushed it past Officer Morton's left boot. He did not see the napkin. He did not see his own boot. He was looking at the small photograph on the laminated card in the open first aid case in the trunk of a silver Volvo XC60. The face on the card was the face of the older man cuffed in the back of his cruiser. The agency text above the name read 3 letters Morton could read and one more line of text beneath the name that he could read too. He had time, in the 7 minutes it took Captain Duvall to arrive, to read every line of that card. And as he read, on a Tuesday evening in July, on the shoulder of US 41, with 2 clouds running, and 1 digital recorder running, and 1 private body camera running, and an envelope of names that had been sealed for 22 years, now sitting open on a Phillips 66 gas pump across the road, Officer Gage Morton learned, line by laminated line, exactly who he had just put in the back of his car. He did not say a word. Pike did not say a word. Avery did not say a word. Hart did not say a word. The cicadas in the palmettos did not say a word. But across the highway, behind a gas pump, Pearl Lattimore reached up, slowly, and put her hand on Serena Mayfield's shoulder, and squeezed, once, the way a woman squeezes the shoulder of another woman who has just done something that cannot be undone. Serena did not turn her head. She did not lower her phone. The phone in her hand kept recording. The cloud, in the corner of her screen, ticked from blue to green and back to blue. Up the highway, north, faint at first, and then less faint, the sound of a single engine carried over the cicadas, and the cars on US 41, and the soft whir of the fuel pump that had clicked off 38 minutes ago at $15 even. It was the engine of an unmarked dark blue Crown Victoria. It was not running fast. It was running steady. It was running on a Tuesday evening in July at 6:47 p.m., exactly the speed limit. In the back of Officer Gage Morton's cruiser, blood drying along his right cheek, hands cuffed behind his back, Devon Whitaker turned his head toward the windshield and listened to that engine for the first time in 20 years. He knew the sound. He had known the sound in 1998 when he had been a third-year recruit at Quantico, and a tall, quiet, iron-disciplined instructor named Roland Duvall had driven up to the firing range every morning at 5:55 in a similar engine, in a similar car, at exactly the speed limit, and he had known, even then, that the man behind the wheel did not raise his voice and did not need to. He turned his head a little further and looked through the back window of the cruiser at the highway behind him. The dark blue Crown Victoria came over the rise at the north end of US 41. It did not flash its lights. It did not run a siren. It came, slowly, steadily, exactly the speed limit, the way it had always come. In the front seat of his own cruiser, Officer Gage Morton finally looked away from the laminated card. He looked, instead, at himself in the rearview mirror. The man in the rearview mirror did not look back. The Crown Victoria slowed at the gravel apron, signaled, and pulled in behind Officer Wells Hart's cruiser. The engine cut. The driver's door opened with the soft, machined click of a vehicle that had been maintained, by the same hand, for 13 years. Captain Roland Duvall stepped out. He was 62 years old. He was 6 feet 2 inches tall. He wore a department windbreaker over a white dress shirt, no tie, and a pair of black uniform trousers ironed along the seam. His hair was cut close to the scalp and gone silver at the temples. He did not carry a clipboard. He did not carry a radio in his hand. He carried, in his left hand, a stainless steel travel mug. In his right hand, nothing. He did not look at Sergeant Pike. He did not look at Deputy Avery. He did not look at Officer Hart, or at the Volvo, or at the open trunk, or at the back of his own cruiser Unit 14, where Devon Whitaker sat with blood drying along his right cheek. He looked, directly and without expression, at Officer Gage Morton. Morton was standing beside the driver's door of Unit 14 with his right hand on his belt. He had not moved in approximately 90 seconds. The hand on his belt looked, at a glance, like the relaxed hand of a confident officer waiting for a superior. It was not relaxed. The thumb had gone white where it pressed the leather. Duvall walked up the shoulder. He did not hurry. He did not slow. He stopped 4 feet from Morton. He did not speak. He looked at Morton's nameplate. The nameplate was a strip of polished brass, regulation issue, 2 1/4 inches by 3/4 of an inch, engraved in standard block lettering, G. Morton. Duvall looked at it. He kept looking at it. He did not look at Morton's eyes. He looked at the nameplate. The silence ran long enough that Pike, 20 feet away, could hear the cicadas in the palmettos behind him, and he could hear, more faintly, the small electric tick of the fuel pump across the highway resetting its display, and he could hear, more faintly than that, his own pulse in his right ear. Duvall took one slow sip from the travel mug. He lowered it. He kept looking at the nameplate. Morton's mouth opened. Duvall raised one finger off the body of the travel mug. Morton's mouth closed. The finger went back down. The silence went on. It went on long enough that across the road, behind the Phillips 66 pump, Serena Mayfield, who had been raised on the courtroom mannerisms of black women in Sarasota County, and who had read every page of every textbook on professional discipline she had ever been assigned, understood, in a way that had nothing to do with words, that she was watching the most dangerous man on the highway speak without speaking. Pearl Lattimore, beside her, had stopped breathing. The cordless phone in Pearl's right hand was forgotten. The manila envelope under her left arm was forgotten. The two women stood very still and watched the man in the dark blue windbreaker stand 4 feet from a uniform he had supervised for 10 years and read the nameplate as if it were a sentence in a closed book. Finally, after what was later timed by federal forensic technicians at 1 minute and 22 seconds, Captain Duvall spoke. "Officer Morton?" His voice was low. It was not raised. It carried. "Yes, Captain." "Take 3 steps back from your vehicle." Morton took 3 steps back. "Sergeant Pike?" "Yes, Captain." "Approach Unit 14. Open the rear passenger door. Identify the man in the back seat." Pike walked to Unit 14. He opened the rear passenger door. The interior light came on. Devon Whitaker turned his face toward the open door. The blood on his cheek had dried into a dark line that ran from the brow to the jaw. His expression was not angry. His expression was the expression of a man waiting, patiently, for a procedure to conclude. "Sir," Pike said, with the formality of a man reading from a script he had not written, "are you able to give your name?" "Devon Whitaker." "Title and agency?" "Senior Counsel, Civil Rights Division, United States Department of Justice. Acting Federal Monitor under the consent decree negotiated with the Manatee Springs Police Department in February." "Identification on your person?" "Inside the leather portfolio in the trunk of my vehicle. Top folder. Tab labeled Monitor Designation." Pike did not move from the open door. He turned his head. "Captain, retrieve the portfolio, Sergeant, personally. Do not permit any other officer to handle it." "Yes, Captain." Pike walked, slowly, to the rear of the Volvo. He reached into the trunk and lifted the leather portfolio with both hands, as if it were a thing made of glass. He carried it back. He set it on the hood of Unit 14. He opened it. He found the top folder. He opened the folder. Inside the folder was a single sheet of cream-colored bond paper, embossed at the top with the seal of the Department of Justice. The text below the seal was 3 short paragraphs in 12-point type. Pike began to read. Notice of designation. Pursuant to 34 United States Code, Section 12601, and the consent decree entered in the matter of United States v. City of Manatee Springs, the undersigned hereby designates Devon T. Whitaker, Senior Counsel, Civil Rights Division, as Federal Monitor for the Manatee Springs Police Department. Said designation is effective February 11th and shall remain in effect for a period of 60 months unless terminated for cause. The Monitor is authorized to conduct unannounced site visits, to interview personnel, to review records, and to file periodic findings with this office and with the court. Signed, Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division. Pike stopped reading. He looked up. He did not look at Morton. He did not look at Duvall. He looked at the open back door of Unit 14 where Devon was watching him. "Sir," Pike said, formally, very formally, "I am going to ask you to step out of the vehicle." He guided Devon out. He turned him by the shoulder. He removed the cuffs. He did not apologize. He did not need to. The removal of the cuffs was the apology. Captain Duvall walked slowly to the open back door of Sergeant Pike's cruiser, where Trent Bellamy was sitting upright in the second seat. He did not open the door himself. He nodded once to Pike, who walked over and opened the door. Duvall leaned in slightly. He spoke at a volume that did not carry past the doorframe. "Mr." He did not say Bellamy. He did not say agent. He said, "Mr." Trent's mouth flickered, almost a smile, almost not. "Captain, are you injured?" "I am not." "Were you struck?" "Once. Open hand, side of the face." "Did you reciprocate?" "I did not." "Will you be filing your own report?" "Through the proper channels, Captain." "Yes." "Through the proper channels." "Yes, Captain." Duvall straightened. He did not have Pike remove Trent's cuffs. He looked instead at Trent's eyes, and Trent looked back, and a piece of communication passed between them that did not require words. It was the communication of a senior officer and a federal agent on an unrelated assignment, whose cover required, at this moment, that the cuffs stay on a little longer for the public benefit of any onlookers who might still be wondering why a Volvo had been pulled over on US 41. Trent did not nod. Duvall did not nod. The door closed gently. Captain Duvall walked back to where Officer Gage Morton was standing, 3 steps from his cruiser, hand still on his belt. "Officer Morton?" "Yes, Captain." "Hand me your weapon." Morton's right hand twitched on his belt. "Captain, hand me your weapon. Grip first." Morton drew his service weapon. He turned it in his palm. He held it out, grip first. Duvall took it. He thumbed the magazine release, caught the magazine, ejected the chambered round into his palm, locked the slide back. He handed the empty pistol to Sergeant Pike, who took it without speaking. Duvall pocketed the magazine and the loose round. "Hand me your badge." Morton's left hand went to his shirt. "Captain, with respect, I have not been afforded an opportunity to—" "Hand me your badge." Morton unpinned his badge, pinned his. He held it out. Duvall took it. He held it for 1 beat. He looked at the engraved number on the back. He pocketed it. "Officer Morton?" "Yes, Captain." "You are placed on administrative leave with pay, effective immediately, pending investigation. You will surrender your departmental property at the precinct within 60 minutes. You will not enter the property room. You will not enter the records office. You will not access any departmental computer system. You will not contact any officer involved in this incident outside the presence of a union representative or counsel. Is that clear?" "Yes, Captain." "Sergeant Pike will drive you to the precinct." "Yes, Captain." "Sergeant Pike." "Yes, Captain." "You will personally accompany Officer Morton to the precinct. You will personally observe the surrender of his department-issued equipment. You will then return to this scene to brief Internal Affairs Lieutenant Riley Connors, who is en route. Is that clear?" "Yes, Captain." "Officer Hart?" "Yes, Captain." "You will surrender both of your body cameras to me directly. The department issue And the personal. There was a small pause. Hart's hand moved, slowly, to the inside of his ballistic vest. He unclipped the personal camera. He held it out alongside the department issue. Duvall took both. "Officer Hart?" "Yes, Captain." "I have read your camera maintenance log for the last 14 months. I am aware why you carry the personal camera. I am also aware that you carry it without departmental authorization, in violation of policy, and that you carry it because you do not trust the equipment you have been issued. You will be written up for the policy violation. You will not be terminated. You will, after a written reprimand, be considered for a transfer to a unit where the equipment you have been issued is not the equipment Officer Morton has been issued. Is that clear?" "Yes, Captain." Deputy Avery. "Captain. Thank you for stopping. Your report will be requested by my office before end of shift tomorrow. You will write it as you saw it." "I always do, Captain." "I know you do." Duvall turned, finally, to the man standing on the gravel beside the silver Volvo, with a dark line of dried blood from brow to jaw. He did not say sir. He did not say mister. He said, "Devon." "Roland." It was the first time in 20 years that the two men had spoken outside of email. "You are bleeding. It will keep." "It will not keep. There is an ambulance 1 mile out. They will look at your forehead before they leave." "All right. How long are you in town?" 5 days, on the original schedule, now indefinitely." "That is acceptable. My office, tomorrow at 8. "I will be there." Duvall held out his right hand. Devon shook it. Pearl Lattimore, behind a Phillips 66 gas pump 20 yards across a 4-lane highway, watched the handshake and put her hand over her mouth and began, finally, to cry, very quietly, into the cup of her own palm. Serena Mayfield, beside her, did not lower her phone. Serena's phone, by then, had recorded 1 hour and 7 minutes of footage, had uploaded all of it to 2 clouds, and had begun, on its own, to overheat. Officer Gage Morton walked, without his weapon and without his badge, to Sergeant Pike's cruiser. He sat down in the passenger seat. The door closed. He did not look back at Captain Duvall. He did not look at the Volvo. He did not look at anything. The cruiser pulled away. It was 6:54 p.m. The first thing Officer Morton did when Sergeant Pike pulled the cruiser into the rear lot of the Manatee Springs precinct 12 minutes later was reach for the cruiser's center console. The console contained a clipboard, a half-eaten roll of antacids, 2 pens, and the keys to Sergeant Pike's personal duty locker. Morton's hand went, with the practiced speed of a man who had done it before, for the keys. Pike caught his wrist before the hand closed. "No." "Dorian." "No." Morton tried to twist his wrist out of Pike's grip. Pike held it. Pike's grip was not the grip of a sergeant. It was the grip of a man who had grown up fishing on the Gulf and could hold a tarpon line through a 60-minute fight without his hand opening. "Get off me!" "Open your hand, officer." "I said get off." Morton swung his free hand. It was a short swing, a left, aimed at Pike's jaw, more reflex than plan. Pike pulled his head back 6 inches, and the punch went past his nose. Morton's elbow struck the dashboard. The fingers of his other hand were still trapped. He swung again. Pike caught the second punch in his open palm and held it. "Stop!" "You set me up." "I did not set you up." "You waited." "I did, officer. That is true." Morton's chest was heaving. The tendon in his neck was standing out. He looked at Pike, eyes wide, and for 1 long second Pike saw exactly the man he had stood next to for 14 years. Exactly the man who had smelled marijuana faintly from 4 drivers' windows that month. Exactly the man who had pulled a flat object out of his hip pocket twice in 22 years that Pearl Lattimore could prove, and probably 8 more times, she could not. "Get out of the cruiser, officer." Morton did not move. "Get out of the cruiser." Morton's free hand opened. It opened slowly, the fingers loosening one by one. Pike released the trapped wrist. Morton put his hand on the door handle. He pushed the door open. He swung his legs out. He stood. His knees were unsteady for the first half second, and then they were not. "Walk." Where? Lieutenant Connor's office. She's waiting. Morton walked. Lieutenant Riley Connors of the Internal Affairs Bureau had been with the Manatee Springs Police Department for 19 years. She had spent 12 of those 19 years investigating other officers. She had, in those 12 years, opened 47 internal investigations. She had closed 44. Of the 44 closed, 11 had ended in termination, 22 had ended in suspension or demotion, and the remaining 11 had ended in findings of no misconduct. She had a spreadsheet on her work computer that tracked the camera maintenance records of every officer in the department. She had, 3 months earlier, flagged Officer Gage Morton's record because the failure rate of his department issue camera, on calls in which the suspect was black, was 93%. She had, that morning, 8 hours before Captain Duvall's Crown Victoria pulled up to mile marker 37 on US 41, been instructed by Captain Duvall to prepare a preliminary file on Officer Gage Morton. She had the preliminary file open on her desk when the precinct's rear door opened and Sergeant Pike walked in with Officer Morton ahead of him. "Officer Morton?" "Lieutenant." "Sit." Morton sat. "You are not under arrest." "I am aware." "You are entitled to representation. The union has been notified. A representative is en route. You may decline to answer my questions until your representative arrives. Do you understand?" "I do." "This conversation is being recorded, audio and video. Both cameras have been verified operational by myself personally in the last 30 seconds. Do you understand?" "I do." "Will you wait for your representative?" "Yes." "Then we will sit." They sat. Morton looked at the wall. Connors looked at her file. The union representative arrived 17 minutes later. He was a man named Brian Halsey. He was 44 years old. He had, in his 9-year career as a union rep, walked 71 officers through internal affairs interviews. He had, in those 71 interviews, never once seen a captain order an officer's badge surrendered at the side of a highway. He sat down beside Morton. He read the file. He read the file again. He did not speak for 90 seconds. "Riley." "Brian." "Are these tonight's recoveries?" "Tonight's, yes, and the 17 pages of historic corroboration that are now in transit from a private witness." "A private witness?" "Yes." "Identified?" "Identified." "By name?" "By name. I will not provide the name in this room." Halsey closed the file. He looked at Morton. "Officer?" "Yes." "You will not answer any further questions tonight. We will request a continuance. You will go home. You will not contact anyone in this precinct without me on the call." "Brian, I'm telling you, the recovery was—" "Officer." "It was—" "Officer." Morton stopped speaking. Halsey stood. "He's going home, Riley." "He is." "We'll set a follow-up. Friday." "Friday." "Are we charging him tonight?" "No charges tonight. The state attorney has not received a referral yet." "Has the federal—" "You'll know when there's something to know." Halsey nodded, once. He took Morton by the elbow and walked him out of the office. Morton did not look at Connors as he passed her. Connors did not look at him. When the door closed, Connors picked up her phone and dialed an extension she had not dialed in 8 years. "Captain." "Riley." "He's gone home." "Good." "It will take me 3 months to prepare the IA report properly." "Take 3 months. The federal piece will take longer." "It always does." "Mr. Whitaker is in your office in the morning." "He is." "Pearl Lattimore's envelope is being copied as we speak." "Pearl." "Pearl." There was a small silence on the line. "Riley." "Captain." "Pearl Lattimore is 68 years old. She has carried that envelope for 9 years. She is going to need somewhere to put it tonight, and someone to sit across the table from her while she puts it down. Will you go?" "I'll go." "Take the long way. She does not need a cruiser at her front door tonight." "I won't take a cruiser." "Thank you, Riley." "Captain." "Go home after. It will still be there tomorrow." "It will, Captain." She hung up. She did not go home. She drove a Honda Accord, her own car, 11 miles south on US 41 to the parking lot of Lattimore's Sunrise Bakery. The open sign was still turned to closed. The light in the back was on. She knocked. Pearl let her in. They sat at a small two-top in the corner with 2 cups of coffee that neither of them drank, and Pearl Lattimore, 68 years old, baker for 41 of those years, talked, for the first time, into a recording device with a federal seal on the side about everything she had seen on the streets of Manatee Springs since 1999. The recording ran 4 hours and 11 minutes. Connors did not interrupt once. When Pearl was finished, she put the manila envelope on the table. Connors took the envelope. She drove home. It was 3:47 a.m. She slept 90 minutes. The internal affairs file on Officer Gage Morton, in the days that followed, grew at a rate that surprised even Riley Connors, who had watched a great many files grow over 19 years. By the end of the first week, the file contained Pearl Lattimore's 4-hour and 11-minute statement, transcribed, 2 hours of Serena Mayfield's video footage from the Phillips 66 pump, authenticated by metadata, by cloud upload timestamps, and by a forensic technician's signed verification that the footage had not been altered between recording and submission, 1 hour and 34 minutes of body camera footage from Officer Wells Hart's personal camera, including the 8 seconds in which Officer Morton's right hand could be seen, on a partially obscured angle, drawing a small flat object from his hip pocket and lowering it into the trunk of a silver Volvo. A forensic chemical analysis of the heat-sealed plastic baggie, which had been found to contain 3.1 grams of methamphetamine. A fingerprint analysis of the heat-sealed plastic baggie, which had returned, on the inside surface of the seal, a clean print belonging to the right thumb of Officer Gage Morton, and the 17 pages of Pearl Lattimore's manila envelope, which contained handwritten notes, dated, of 9 separate incidents involving Officer Morton between 1999 and 2017. By the end of the second week, the file had been forwarded, in a sealed and serialized chain of custody, to the Office of the United States Attorney for the Middle District of Florida. By the end of the third month, an Internal Affairs preliminary report, signed by Lieutenant Riley Connors and reviewed by Captain Roland Duvall, had been entered into the departmental personnel record. The findings were limited, by procedural rule, to 4 sustained allegations: improper detention without articulable suspicion, use of force not consistent with departmental policy, failure to maintain camera operability, and submission of a false official report. The recommendation was termination. The recommendation went, as the procedural rule required, to a disciplinary hearing. The disciplinary hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday in late October. Officer Gage Morton did not attend the disciplinary hearing. He attended instead on the Friday before the hearing was scheduled to begin, his 5th meeting with his union representative, in a small conference room on the 2nd floor of the Police Benevolent Association building in Sarasota. The meeting had been scheduled for 90 minutes. It lasted 40. It ended when Officer Morton, at minute 38, picked up the chair he had been sitting in, lifted it overhead, and threw it across the room. The chair struck a framed photograph of a retired chief and shattered the glass. A long shard of glass fell from the frame and cut Brian Halsey across the back of his right hand. Halsey did not call the police. He did not file a report. He did, when his hand stopped bleeding, hold up his palm and say, very quietly, the sentence, "Gage, we're done." That was the first action scene in the back half of the file. The second was the booking, 3 weeks later, of Officer Gage Morton on a federal grand jury indictment under 18 United States Code, Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law, and 18 United States Code, Section 1519, falsification of records in a federal investigation. The booking took place in the federal courthouse in Tampa at 7:04 a.m. on a Wednesday. Morton, walking from the back of an unmarked sedan to the rear door of the courthouse, broke from the U.S. Marshal at his elbow and made it 12 feet across the parking lot before 2 marshals brought him down on the asphalt. He landed on his right shoulder, the shoulder dislocated. He was treated at the hospital under guard before being booked. He did not break free again. The third scene was a moment, 2 months after the indictment, in a Manatee Springs courtroom where a hearing on a separate matter, a controlled substance possession case originally filed against Devon Whitaker on the night of the stop, was being formally dismissed. The hearing was procedural. It lasted 4 minutes. Devon Whitaker was not in the courtroom. The Assistant United States Attorney, a woman named Adelaide Voigt, stood at the prosecutor's table and read the motion to dismiss into the record. The judge granted the motion. The judge struck the file. The judge, a man named Rolando Cervera, said, on the record, the sentence, "Let the record reflect that the dismissal is with prejudice, and that no factual basis for the original charge has ever existed." Officer Morton was not in that courtroom either. He was, at that moment, sitting in a chair in his union lawyer's office in Sarasota, listening to that lawyer explain, in very flat language, the federal sentencing guidelines applicable to 2 counts of color of law deprivation and 1 count of falsification of records. He listened for 40 minutes. He did not throw any furniture. He did stand up at one point and put his fist through the drywall of his lawyer's office above the credenza. The drywall was 9/16 of an inch thick. His fist went through it cleanly. He pulled his fist back. The skin on his second knuckle was split. The lawyer waited until the bleeding slowed before continuing. "Gage?" "What?" "They have the planting on video." "I know." "They have the print on the seal." "I know." "They have 9 prior incidents corroborated by a witness who has 30 years of standing in your jurisdiction." "I know." "They have a federal monitor's notarized statement that you struck a federal officer in the face during an unlawful detention." "I know." "They have a captain who saw your nameplate and remembered every report he had ever signed off on with your name on it." "I know." "You will not be acquitted." Morton sat back down. He put his bleeding hand on his thigh. The blood soaked into the gray of his trousers. He looked at the wall opposite, where a framed picture of his lawyer's children hung at eye level. "What's the offer?" "They are open to a plea. The plea, as it stands today, is 14 months federal custody, 3 years supervised release, surrender of your law enforcement certification, and a cooperation agreement against any other officers implicated in the historic incidents Mrs. Lattimore documented." "I would have to roll on Pike." "You would have to tell the truth about Pike." "That's not the same thing." "Gage, from where I sit, today, in this office, with a hole in my drywall and your blood on my carpet, those are exactly the same thing." Morton looked at the carpet. He looked at the hole in the drywall. He took the deal 11 days later, on a Thursday morning, at the federal courthouse in Tampa, in a hearing that lasted 27 minutes. Sergeant Dorian Pike was named in the cooperation agreement on the following Monday. Sergeant Dorian Pike resigned from the Manatee Springs Police Department on the same Monday afternoon, 3 minutes after the certified mail arrived at his home. He turned in his service weapon, his badge, his cruiser keys, and his portfolio. He sat for a 4-hour proffer interview the following Wednesday. He gave names. He gave dates. He gave page numbers of reports, in his own handwriting, that he had written to make Officer Morton's stops sound lawful. He did not, at any point during the proffer, look the Assistant United States Attorney in the eye. He did, at the end of the interview, ask her one question. "Ma'am?" "Yes, Sergeant." "On the form, the chain of custody, the corner of it. There was a word in pencil. I wrote it. Did you see it?" "I saw it." "What did it say?" "It said ask." "That's right." "You never asked me, Sergeant." "No, ma'am, I didn't." "Why are you asking now?" "Because the captain looked at his nameplate." She nodded very slowly. Sergeant Pike. "Ma'am, that is the most honest thing you have said in this room today." "I know it, ma'am." The proffer was entered into the cooperation file. Pike pleaded to a single count of falsification of records. He was sentenced to 9 months in federal custody. He served 7. He did not return to law enforcement. The internal review of the Manatee Springs Police Department, conducted under the federal monitor designation that Devon Whitaker had carried, in laminated card form, in a first aid case in the trunk of a silver Volvo, was completed in late spring, 11 months after the stop. The review found 147 instances of improper traffic stops over the preceding 7 years, of which 61 had resulted in arrests later vacated, of which 19 had resulted in convictions later overturned, of which 4 had resulted in prison sentences served by men who had been factually innocent. One of those 4 men was named James Ridley. James Ridley was deceased. His daughter, a woman named Annette Ridley Owens, received, on a Friday afternoon in June, a hand-delivered envelope at her home in Bradenton, Florida. The envelope contained a notice of vacatur of her father's 2003 conviction, an apology on Department of Justice letterhead, and a small business card with a phone number on it. The phone number was Mama Pearl Lattimore's. Annette Ridley Owens called the phone number that evening. Mama Pearl picked up on the second ring. They talked for 2 hours and 40 minutes. They cried for parts of those 2 hours and 40 minutes. They scheduled a Sunday lunch at the bakery, where neither of them ate anything but where Mama Pearl held Annette Ridley Owens's hand across the small two-top in the corner for a long time. The civil settlement, when it came, was negotiated under a sealed agreement and announced, 12 months after the stop, at a press conference outside the Manatee Springs City Hall. The settlement amount was not disclosed. The official statement from the city read, in its entirety, the city of Manatee Springs has reached a resolution with the parties involved in the events of July of last year. The city extends its sincerest regret to all individuals harmed and reaffirms its commitment to the reforms required under the federal consent decree, which has been extended for an additional 60 months at the recommendation of the federal monitor. There was no admission of wrongdoing. There never is. Captain Roland Duvall did not retire. Captain Roland Duvall did not seek promotion. Captain Roland Duvall, on the Tuesday after the federal indictment of Officer Gage Morton was handed down, walked into his office at 7:58 a.m., set his stainless steel travel mug on his desk, opened his top drawer, took out a small metal nameplate that read G. Morton, and placed it in a manila envelope. He sealed the envelope. He labeled it with one word, in black marker. The word was the date of the stop. He filed the envelope in the bottom drawer of his desk. He never opened it again. Serena Mayfield finished her second year of law school 3 weeks after she gave a sworn deposition in a federal case styled United States versus Gage Morton. She graduated on time 15 months later. She was hired, on the basis of her clinic record, by the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, where her first supervising attorney was a man named Devon Whitaker. She started on a Monday. On her first day, Mr. Whitaker handed her a leather portfolio with her name embossed on the corner and said simply, "You earned the angle. Now we get the camera." She did not cry in his office. She cried on the elevator. She had time. Pearl Lattimore reopened her bakery the following morning at 4 a.m., as she had every morning for 41 years, and started the bread. Trent Bellamy did not appear in the federal courtroom in Tampa during Officer Morton's plea. He did not appear in the federal courtroom 3 months later when Sergeant Pike was sentenced. He did not appear at all in any public document associated with the case. He had been pulled the morning after the stop on US 41 from the assignment that had originally brought him to Manatee Springs. The assignment had been a separate one, unrelated to the consent decree. It involved a man whose name had not yet been entered into any public file. The pull had been a precaution. The cover, with luck and management, would survive the night of the stop. It did. It survived because Captain Roland Duvall had not used Trent's name on the side of a highway, because Sergeant Dorian Pike had not been told what was in the second laminated card in Trent's wallet, and because a young woman behind a Phillips 66 gas pump had been smart enough, when she emailed a copy of her footage to her clinic supervisor, to redact by hand the 4 seconds in which the second card had been visible in close-up. She had redacted the 4 seconds before she even understood what she was redacting. She had simply seen a face that did not, in her gut, belong on the public internet, and she had blurred it. The original, unredacted footage existed on exactly one of her 2 clouds. She gave that copy to one person. She gave it to Captain Roland Duvall in his office on the Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. when Devon Whitaker brought her in and Captain Duvall extended a hand across his desk and said, "Miss Mayfield, thank you for being where you were." She handed him the drive. "Thank you, Miss Mayfield." "Captain, you're going to be very good at this." "I'm going to try to be, Captain." "You will." "How do you know?" "Because Mr. Whitaker would not have brought you to my office at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday morning if you weren't." She did not have an answer to that. She did not need one. 2 threads in the federal file on Manatee Springs never closed. The first was the dash camera audio from Officer Gage Morton's cruiser, Unit 14, on the night of the stop. The audio, recovered by federal forensic technicians and entered into evidence, contained 10 minutes of total silence between 23:14 and 23:24 hours. The silence had not been redacted. It had not been overwritten. The microphone had simply, for 10 minutes, recorded nothing. The forensic technicians could not explain it. The cruiser had been parked during those 10 minutes behind the Manatee Springs precinct in a lot covered by exactly 0 working security cameras. Officer Morton's exit from the cruiser, at the start of those 10 minutes, had been logged at the precinct's rear door card reader. His re-entry, 10 minutes later, had also been logged. What he had done in those 10 minutes was never established. The second thread was a single email, recovered from a backup server during the federal review, dated 3 weeks before the stop. The email was sent from an account belonging to a former deputy chief of the Manatee Springs Police Department to an account belonging to a private security consultant in Tallahassee. The body of the email had been redacted to a single line. The line read, "Tideline timeline holds. Confirm receiver." No one in Manatee Springs admitted to knowing what Project Tideline was. The deputy chief had retired in June. The private security consultant had moved out of state in July. The federal monitor's office requested both individuals for interview. Both individuals declined to respond to the request. The matter remained, 18 months after the stop, under continuing review. In the bottom drawer of Captain Roland Duvall's desk, 1 floor above the records office of the Manatee Springs Police Department, the manila envelope labeled with the date of the stop sat, untouched, beside another manila envelope, identical in size and shape, labeled with the words Project Tideline in the same black marker, in the same hand, sealed since the day after the federal review had begun. That second envelope Captain Duvall had not yet opened. He opened his top desk drawer one Tuesday morning, 20 months after the stop, and looked down at the bottom drawer. He did not open it. He closed the top drawer. He picked up his stainless steel travel mug. He walked out to his Crown Victoria, parked in his usual spot in the lot behind the precinct, and turned the key in the ignition. The engine, maintained by the same hand for 13 years, started cleanly. He sat for a moment with his hand on the gear shift. Then he reversed, slowly, out of the lot, signaled, and pulled onto US 41, heading north, exactly the speed limit, in a dark blue Crown Victoria that did not flash its lights and did not run a siren, and did not do anything at all to suggest, to any driver who passed it on the 4-lane highway that Tuesday morning, that the man behind the wheel had spent the previous 20 months thinking, every single day, about a nameplate on a uniform on the shoulder of a road at 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday evening in July. He did not know yet what was in the second envelope. He suspected. He had time. Across town, at 4 a.m., Pearl Lattimore turned the key in the back door of Lattimore's Sunrise Bakery, flipped on the lights, tied her apron, and started the bread. 2 years after the stop, on a Tuesday in July, the dawn light came up over US 41 the way it always did. Slow at first, gray, then a long stripe of pale orange behind the palmettos, then full daylight at 6:12 a.m. on the dot. The Phillips 66 pump where Serena Mayfield had stood with a phone braced against the metal frame had been replaced, the previous spring, with a newer model in a different shade of yellow. The asphalt around it had been resurfaced. The mile marker for 37 had been struck twice by drunk drivers in the intervening months, and was, on the morning in question, slightly bent at its base. The Crown Victoria of Captain Roland Duvall, pulled into the parking lot of Lattimore's Sunrise Bakery at 5:40 a.m. He did not park in front. He parked, as he had every Tuesday morning for 23 months, on the side of the building, beside the dumpster, where the only window into the bakery was a small, high one Pearl Lattimore did not look out of. He went in through the back. The back door was unlocked, as it always was at 5:40, because Pearl Lattimore had been in the kitchen since 4. He hung his windbreaker on the hook by the door. He poured a cup of coffee from the pot beside the bread oven into his stainless steel travel mug. He carried the mug to the small two-top in the corner. He sat down. He did not speak. Pearl, at the oven, did not turn around for 2 full minutes. When she did turn around, she had a paper plate in her hand. On the plate was a single apple turnover, still warm. She brought the plate to the two-top. She set it down. She sat across from him. "Roland." "Pearl." "How is your wife?" "Same. Better some days. Worse on Sundays." "Sundays are the hardest." "They are." "You eating?" "I'm eating." "You're not eating." "I'm eating, Pearl." "Eat the turnover." He ate the turnover. She watched him eat it. This was the conversation, more or less, that they had every Tuesday morning at 5:40. It had started on a Tuesday 23 months earlier, when Captain Duvall had walked into the bakery for the first time, in uniform, with a manila envelope under his arm, and had asked Pearl Lattimore if she would sit with him for 10 minutes. He had given her the envelope. The envelope had contained a copy of her own 4-hour and 11-minute statement, professionally transcribed, bound in a black plastic spine, with a handwritten cover sheet on which Captain Duvall had written, simply, "For your records, Mrs. Lattimore. Thank you." She had cried, that first morning, for a long time. He had sat with her until she stopped. Then he had asked her, before he left, whether she would mind if he came back the following Tuesday at 5:40. She had said she would not mind. He had not missed a Tuesday since. This morning, the morning of the 2nd anniversary, she watched him finish the turnover, and she said, very carefully, "Annette is coming Sunday." Annette. James Ridley's girl. She comes the first Sunday of every month. I remember Annette. She brings her son sometimes. He's 7. He was born after his grandfather passed. What's the boy's name? James. After. 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 Captain Duvall's hand tightened very briefly on the handle of his mug. Pearl. Roland. I'm going to tell you something this morning, because it is the 2nd anniversary, and because Annette is coming Sunday, and because I have decided this morning that I am not going to carry it alone for a 3rd year. All right. I opened the 2nd envelope. She set down her own coffee. When? Friday. And it is what we thought it was, and it goes higher than I thought it went, and I have spent the weekend deciding what to do. Have you decided? I have. What did you decide? I decided that the bakery does not need to know any of it, Pearl, not the names, not the timeline, not the dollar amount, none of it. What you need to know this morning, on the 2nd anniversary, is that the work that started at 6:07 p.m. on a Tuesday in July is not finished. I am going to be in this chair on Tuesday mornings for at least another 18 months, possibly longer. The reason I am telling you this is so that, when you read in the paper what you are eventually going to read, you know that I have known about it the whole time, and that I have been working on it the whole time, and that the work has not stopped. She looked at him for a long time. Roland. Yes. I will save you a turnover every Tuesday for as long as you need. That is what I came in here to hear, Pearl. I know it is. He finished the coffee. He stood up. He put on his windbreaker. He walked back to his Crown Victoria. He started the engine. The engine, maintained by the same hand for 15 years now, started cleanly. He pulled onto US 41 at 5:57 a.m., signaled, and headed north, exactly the speed limit. Behind him, in the kitchen of Lattimore's Sunrise Bakery, Pearl Lattimore began the second batch of bread. Serena Mayfield was, that same Tuesday morning, on a flight from Washington, D.C. to Atlanta, with a connecting flight to Tampa. She was 26 years old. She had been an attorney with the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice for 10 months. Her business card read, Serena T. Mayfield, Trial Attorney, Pattern, or Practice Section. She carried, in her work bag, a leather portfolio with her name embossed on the corner. The portfolio contained a printed copy of a sealed motion she had filed the previous Friday, on the second anniversary eve of the stop she had filmed at 24 years old in a federal case styled United States versus a defendant whose name was not yet public. The defendant was a former deputy chief of the Manatee Springs Police Department. She had drafted the motion herself. Her supervising attorney, Devon Whitaker, had reviewed it 3 times before she filed it. The third review had concluded with him handing it back to her without changes and saying simply, "Ready, counselor." She had filed it at 5:04 p.m. on the Friday. The flight landed in Atlanta at 7:50 a.m. She had a 64-minute layover. She bought a coffee. She did not drink it. She walked instead to a window in Concourse B and stood looking out at the runway in the gray morning light. And she thought, the way she did every July, about a Phillips 66 pump in Manatee Springs, Florida, and a phone braced against a metal frame, and a woman with a manila envelope under her arm, and a man in a dark blue windbreaker who had stared at a nameplate without saying a word for a full minute and 22 seconds. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from Devon. The text read, "Your motion got assigned to Cervera. Hearing is set for September 4th. Drink the coffee, counselor." She drank the coffee. She made the connecting flight. She landed in Tampa at 9:47 a.m. She rented a car. She drove south on I-75. She did not take US 41. She had not driven on US 41 in 2 years. The first time she had needed to, 6 months after the stop, she had pulled off at the exit for I-75 and sat in the parking lot of a Cracker Barrel for 40 minutes with her hands on the wheel until her hands stopped shaking. After that, she had simply not driven on it. She drove on I-75. She took the exit for the Manatee County Courthouse at 10:34 a.m. She parked. She walked across the small landscaped plaza to the front steps. She climbed the steps. She showed her bar card and her DOJ credential to the deputy at the metal detector. The deputy nodded her through. She walked, by memory, to Courtroom 3. The hallway outside Courtroom 3 was lined with wooden benches the color of dark honey. On the third bench from the door, alone, in a charcoal gray suit and a clean white shirt, sat Devon Whitaker. He stood when he saw her. "Counselor?" "Devon?" "You good?" "I'm good." "How was the flight?" "It was a flight." "Pearl sent you something." He held out a paper bag. She took it. She opened it. There was a single apple turnover inside, in a paper liner, still faintly warm. "How?" "She put it on the captain's car at 5:50 this morning. He drove it to my office at 8. I drove it here at 10. The bakery has its own logistics now." "It does." "Eat it before you go in." She ate it before she went in. The hearing in Courtroom 3 that morning was not the federal case. The federal case was in Tampa, at the federal courthouse, on a different docket, on a different day, and would, when it came, be argued by Serena in front of Judge Rolando Cervera on September 4th. The hearing in Courtroom 3 that morning was a state hearing, a small procedural one, on a motion to vacate 3 additional convictions of 3 additional men whose cases had been identified in the Federal Monitor's continuing review as having been built on traffic stops conducted by Officer Morton between 2007 and 2012. The state attorney's office had not opposed the motion. The hearing lasted 9 minutes. 3 convictions were vacated. The presiding judge, a woman in her 50s named Antonia Vega, signed 3 orders. She handed the orders to her clerk. The clerk stamped each one. The clerk handed Serena a courtesy copy of each. Serena walked out of the courtroom with 3 orders in her left hand and an empty paper bag in her right. Devon was waiting in the hallway. 3 for 3. 3 for 3. How many does that make? That makes 17 vacatures total. 17. With 3 more pending and the federal piece still to come. Pearl is going to need a bigger envelope. Pearl already has a bigger envelope. They walked out of the courthouse together. In the parking lot, she stopped. Devon? Yes. I want to drive on US 41 today. All right. I want you in the car with me when I do it. All right. He got in the passenger seat of her rental. She drove out of the courthouse parking lot, north on a county road, and at the intersection with US 41 she signaled, and she turned right, and she drove, exactly the speed limit, the 11 miles south to the Phillips 66 pump at mile marker 37. She did not pull in. She drove past it, very slowly, looking once at the new yellow paint of the new pump, at the resurfaced asphalt, at the mile marker that was slightly bent at its base, and she kept driving. She drove another half mile. She made a U-turn at a break in the median. She drove back. This time she pulled in. She parked at the pump. She got out. She did not put her hand on the metal frame the way her hand had been on it at 6:07 p.m. on a Tuesday evening in July 2 years earlier. She just stood beside it in the morning sun and looked across the 4-lane highway at the small single-story building with the hand-painted sign that read Lattimore's Sunrise Bakery. The bakery's open sign was turned to open. A woman in a flour-dusted apron was visible, faintly, through the front window. Devon, in the passenger seat, did not say anything. Serena got back in the car. Devon? Yes. I would like a turnover. All right, counselor. She crossed US 41 at the light. She pulled into the small parking lot of the bakery. She and Devon walked in through the front door. The bell over the door rang. Pearl Lattimore looked up from behind the counter, saw who had come in, and put down the dough scraper she was holding. Honey. Mama Pearl. They held each other for a long time. Devon waited by the door. When they let go, Pearl turned to him. Mr. Whitaker? Mrs. Lattimore. You eating today? I'm eating. You're not eating. I'm eating, Mrs. Lattimore. Sit down, both of you. I'll bring you some. They sat down at the small two-top in the corner. Pearl brought them 2 plates. On each plate was a single apple turnover. They ate. After they ate, Pearl sat down with them. Roland was here this morning. I know, Devon said. He drove your turnover to my office at 8. I'm glad he did. He told me he opened the second envelope, Pearl. He told me too. What do you think? I think he is going to need to come in on Tuesdays for a while longer. He will. And I will save him a turnover. You will. And the work will not stop. It will not. She looked at Serena. Honey. Yes, Mama Pearl. Do you remember what I said to you that night? You said don't stop. That's right. I haven't, Mama Pearl. I know you haven't. And I won't. I know that too. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Pearl Lattimore stood up, walked behind the counter, and came back with a small paper bag. She set the bag on the table in front of Serena. What's this, Mama Pearl? That's for the road. I'm flying back tonight. That's for the plane, then. Serena looked inside the bag. There were 3 turnovers in it. She did not ask why 3. 3 was the number of orders she was carrying in her left hand. 3 was the number of vacatures from that morning. 3 was the number of grandchildren Pearl Lattimore had between her 2 surviving daughters in Bradenton. 3 was a number Pearl Lattimore knew how to count to with her hands, and a number she had been counting to, by herself, in the kitchen, since 4 a.m. Serena tucked the bag into her work bag. She and Devon walked out of the bakery. She drove him back to the airport. On the way, on I-75, in the late afternoon light with the bag of 3 turnovers in the back seat, she said, Devon? Yes. Roland told Pearl he is going to be in that chair for at least another 18 months. I know. You knew before I did. I did, counselor, yes. What is in the second envelope? You will read about it on a Friday in the fall. All right. You will read about it because you are going to write the press release. All right. Counselor? Yes. Eat your turnover before security. She did. 8 months later, on a Friday in the fall, the United States Attorney for the Middle District of Florida announced, in a press conference held outside the federal courthouse in Tampa, the unsealing of an indictment in the matter of United States versus a former deputy chief of the Manatee Springs Police Department, and 3 other individuals whose names had not previously appeared in any public document associated with the Manatee Springs case. The indictment alleged a conspiracy spanning 14 years to facilitate, conceal, and profit from a pattern of pretextual traffic stops, planted evidence, and coordinated false reports across 3 counties in southwest Florida. The indictment named, by code name, an arrangement referred to in internal documents as Project Tideline. The press release was drafted by the Pattern or Practice section of the Civil Rights Division. The drafting attorney was Serena Mayfield. The senior reviewing attorney was Devon Whitaker. The press conference was attended in the 3rd row by Captain Roland Duvall in his department windbreaker, with his stainless steel travel mug in his left hand. He did not speak. He did not need to. When the press conference was over, he drove back to Manatee Springs, exactly the speed limit, and parked his Crown Victoria in the lot behind the precinct, and walked up to his office and opened the bottom drawer of his desk and removed the manila envelope labeled with the words Project Tideline in black marker, and took out a black pen and wrote, beneath the original label, in smaller letters, the date of the indictment. He put the envelope back in the drawer. He closed the drawer. He sat for a moment with his hands flat on the desk. Then he picked up his desk phone and dialed Pearl Lattimore's bakery. Sunrise Bakery, this is Pearl. Pearl. Roland. It is done. All of it. The first piece. The big one. Yes. Roland. Yes. You eating tonight? I'm eating, Pearl. You're not eating. I am tonight. I will save you a turnover for the morning. Pearl. Yes. Save 2. 2. There is a young attorney flying down tomorrow. She would like one. I will save 2. Thank you, Pearl. Roland. Yes. You did good. We did, Pearl. Yes, we did. He hung up the phone. He sat at his desk for a long time, in the lengthening afternoon light, with his hands flat on the wood and his nameplate, R. Duvall, polished and straight, on the lapel of his department windbreaker, hanging on the hook by the door. Across town, in the kitchen of Lattimore's Sunrise Bakery, Pearl Lattimore set out 2 extra turnovers on a tray, covered them with a clean white cloth, and walked back to the front counter. She looked out the window at US 41 and at the Phillips 66 pump across the 4-lane road. The pump was new. The asphalt was new. The mile marker, finally, had been straightened. She watched a silver sedan drive by going south and a red pickup go by going north, and the slow blink of the Phillips 66 sign reset for the evening, and she thought, the way she had thought every Friday afternoon for 2 years and 4 months, about a young woman in a denim jacket behind a gas pump with a phone braced against a metal frame. The phone, somewhere in Washington that afternoon, was sitting in a small evidence locker in a federal forensic facility where it had sat, archived and serial numbered, since Serena Mayfield had handed it over on a Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. 2 years and 4 months earlier. The cloud in the corner of its screen was no longer ticking, but the recording it had captured on the shoulder of a 4-lane highway in Manatee Springs, Florida, at 6:07 p.m. on a Tuesday evening in July, had become, in the months and years that followed, a piece of paper trail long enough to reach from a Phillips 66 gas pump to a federal courthouse in Tampa, to a bottom drawer in a captain's office, to a small 2-top in the corner of a bakery and back again. It was still reaching. It would be reaching, Pearl Lattimore thought, for a long time yet. She looked at the clock above the door. It was 4:11 p.m. She had 2.5 hours before she closed for the night. She had a small list of things to do before she could turn the open sign to closed. She had bread to wrap. She had a delivery truck due at 5. She had a phone call to return to her younger daughter in Bradenton about a Sunday lunch. She had 2 turnovers on a tray under a clean white cloth, waiting for a Tuesday morning at 5:40 that was 4 days away. She had time. She had, finally, after 68 years on this earth and 41 of them at the same oven, time. She set the cordless phone down on its cradle behind the counter. She did not pick it up again that day. Outside, on US 41, the dusk light came in long over the palmettos. The slow blink of the Phillips 66 sign caught it and threw it, very faintly, against the front window of the bakery in a soft, yellow rhythm that had been going on for 2 years and 4 months, and would, in all likelihood, go on for a great many more. Inside, behind the counter, Pearl Lattimore tied a fresh apron over the old one and started quietly on the morning's first batch of dough.